And so, Dane, you did such a good job. I want to let you kick off. The next question is, what does it mean when you hear erasure, collective amnesia, suffering, technical freedom?
That's a mouthful. Do we have a couple of days for that? A couple of books. So the fifth episode, which was in two parts, that spoke about land and how land was systematically taken away from black farmers in Louisiana. And so when I first heard about that particular story, it was complete. It was very personal because my grandparents farmed. I used to go I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, so I used to go. They had their plot of land, so I used to go and farm with them. Corn, peas, sorrel, you all call it hibiscus. But more particularly in the American context, my mind immediately ran to 1938. And so the 1938, what's so significant about that is something called the Missouri sharecropping protests. So African Americans in Missouri decided that they were going to protest sharecroppers. Why? Because in the 1920s, the Great Depression had started for farmers very early. People were not buying, and they were overproducing. So what did the federal government do? Well, they signed something called the Federal Agricultural Adjustment Act, something in that manner, right? My brain's a little fuzzy. I have a daddy brain, so please forgive me here. And what that did was that the federal government paid farmers money so that they can not farm, but they will only farm 2/3 of their land. Now, farmers say, you can pay us? Okay, great. Not to farm? Even better. Who doesn't like that? But the federal government said, well, slow down, bro. We're going to give that money we gave you, you have to cut a check for your sharecroppers. So, sure, we'll do that. They didn't. And so it took a reverend by the name of Owen Whitfield, who was expecting around this time, cold as hell, to get a check. And the tenant, the owner of that land, essentially gave him a moth-eaten suit. This was a man who had 12 kids, and he was given a raggedy old suit. So how is he going to feed his kids? So what he does, he organizes, and they line the highways of Missouri. So you're going to see what greed has done to us, what starvation looks like. And so the state brings in the troops and they remove them. They say this is a health issue. And so they put them in swampland. No. Any people who has any kind of common sense. If it's a health issue, why are you putting people in swampland? So the HBCUs find out what's going on. They raise money. And so they petition and they get these people to be removed. And for one of the first times in which a government in any form, local, state, decides that they're going to build some kind of homes specifically for black folks, because most of the time black folks in this country, we move into places where white folks or ethnic whites used to live and no longer are living, because they've assimilated into whiteness. So we inherit what was the scraps, so to speak. So this was specifically built for black folks. But it took organizing and it took a lot of work. Fast forward into Louisiana, you had these black farmers who were being systematically denied loans so that they can farm, self-determinate. And at the end of it, what Junberg said was essentially, it came to me as if only white men are allowed to farm. And we are meant to simply just be their tenants. So when I was listening to it, I had to listen to it a couple of times, because this was the largest civil rights settlement in this country's history. Class action lawsuit, right? Each farmer only received $50,000. They lost acres of land. Acres. Not no one or two. If some of you live in Jersey and Pennsylvania and stuff like that, not no one or two. They lost acres, dozens of acres of land. So when we talk about this erasure, right, there's a precedent that's set. And when they were doing the investigations, we learned that there have been complaints lodged by black farmers since the 1980s, 1970s, all the way into the 1990s. So here we are today in present time, where in plain sight we are seeing the civil rights branch of the DOJ being underfunded, understaffed, and these are clear civil rights issues. We had an attorney general in the beginning who was not for civil rights. So where does that leave us today? Right? And so these are clear civil rights issues that are the rollbacks. And they have been, and the commission is out. I'm sorry if I'm taking up time. There are commissions that are out right now that have shown that there have been clear civil rights rollbacks in education, in the DOJ, and housing. And so, the second reconstruction, which a lot of people like to say is the 64 bill, the Equal Opportunity Act, the 65 bill, the Voter Registration Act, and the 68 bill, the Fair Housing Act, right? Those are significant civil rights rollbacks that are happening within those bills that are being passed. So in other words, what are you trying to tell the disenfranchised not working class, the disenfranchised population of people that you brought for free, right? That are trying to self-determinate, but you're taking away their tools. What are you saying to them?
To dovetail on what you said, but you're talking about equity, and what is equity? So equity can really be distilled in this way. If we all in this room had exactly the same characteristics, exactly the same money in the bank, the same educational level, and we all decided to start our own society, and we needed to decide what benefits you would have and what burdens you would have, we would be able to do it equitably. Because we would then be able to understand, without the artificial advantages of race and sex and wealth and education, blah, 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 we would be able to actually come to some decision about what is fair. Because you would want to make sure that your slice of the pie is as proportional to the next person. And when we're talking about equity, we have to understand what it means. Now, let me take it one more step when you're talking about equity. It doesn't necessarily mean that the slice of the pie is exactly proportional, because think about this for a moment. If you have a child, the needs of the 3-year-old are different than the needs of the 13-year-old. So you're actually going to do what needs to be done for the 3-year-old to build capacity, to get them to a place where they are functioning more self-sufficient. So understand what equity is as we continue to talk about it in this session.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to... We've talked a lot today about the construct that was done on purpose to affect a certain group of people. But in doing that, us three here also are beneficiaries of the fault lines or the space that's created in the systems, and we kind of pushed through and grew up through the cracks, so to say. And how do you recognize your privilege and use that privilege to continue to pay it forward and create privilege for more people like you? In knowing all of what we just discussed, because it's hard sometimes to see, the sun because of the clouds, right? But knowing that the sun is there, we keep pushing, we keep growing, and we keep inspiring, right? So help me understand what you do to recognize your privilege and be able to pay it forward amidst the storm that you fight on a daily basis, microaggressions, oppression, so on.
Check what one you know, man. Thankful for the blessings that are falling on my table. Learning my lessons, now I'm willing and I'm able to do just what I can. As humble as I am, working towards a goal, and we give thanks for helping hands. Pray for health and strength, a life, a length and peace of mind. Good people and good vibe, yes, we give thanks every time. Every single line, all when it no rhyme, we come for sing redemption songs for the people. Look at where we're coming from. Looking back at where the journey began, I really have to say that I'm strong, I'm strong. All praises to the Most High One. Look at where I'm coming